Hello BookTube, my name is Elizabeth. Welcome to my channel, Bookends and Books. In this video, I want to give you some tips that I've tested myself to help you find books you will be able to read in times of stress, in times of anxiety. Now, I'm not talking about chronic stress or chronic anxiety. If that is your case, I can only invite you to consult a professional. I'm talking about temporary situations, exceptional situations over which you have absolutely no control. The only thing you can do is wait for the situation to end. Now, in such situation, chances are that you will find it difficult to concentrate, or that the energy you will need to concentrate will not be turned entirely towards the book. It probably will be turned towards tuning out the situation. Now I'm going to stop talking in riddles and speak plainly. I live in Ottawa, and as of filming this video, my town has been occupied by protesters for 3 weeks. They have been extremely noisy, and they have made our lives miserable. Let's just put it plainly that way. It's been horrible to live in Ottawa for the past 3 weeks. And my only escape, basically the only thing I can do, is to read. It's a good thing I love to read, it's not a problem at all. But I found it difficult to read the same books I would have read last month, let's say. At the beginning of the month, I started to read The Doctor's Blackwell by Janice P. Nimura. This is a nonfiction about 2 women who became the first women doctors in the United States. It's interesting, it's well written, it's not particularly difficult, but I cannot read this book. It just requires too much mental energy, and I'm using too much mental energy to tune out the helicopter noises, to tune out the blaring of the horns noises and all of that, just pretending that everything is fine. So I cannot read this. But I did manage to read in February. I read quite a lot, in fact, and I'm going to share the tips, the solutions that I found with you. The first group of tips is to help you find books that you will be able to get into. It's tips for when your lack of concentration prevents you from getting into a book. So tip number 1 would be read genre fiction. The reason I think it's easier to get into a genre fiction book is that there are rules to the genre. There is a structure that is more or less predictable, and in a way we already know what we're going to get. My 2 go-to genres are romance and mysteries. Now, in romance, we start at the beginning of the book. There are 2 people, and we know that at the end of the book they will be together and happy. So it's predictable, and it's not the predictability of the outcome that makes it easy to get into the book. It's the fact that it comes with a whole bunch of rules, and we know what the story is about. So we don't have to look for several chapters trying to figure out, okay, what is this about? What is it the author is trying to tell me? The author is trying to tell me a love story, and that's simple as that. In the case of mysteries, there's a murder or a crime of some sort, or perhaps something we don't know exactly that happens at the beginning of the story, and by the end of it we know that the mystery will be solved. We will have a clean wrap-up of the situation. So once again, we don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what is it the author is trying to tell me. The author is trying to show you a puzzle and to solve the puzzle, and that is simple as that. And I think, though I don't read a lot of other genre fiction, but I think it's the same sort of thing you can expect from horror or from thrillers or some other genre fiction. There are rules, there's a structure, you know what you're getting when you start the book. So it's much easier to get into the book when you know what it's about. Tip number 2, go to a favorite author. If you have read a few books by an author and you read, let's say you've read 5 books by an author and you read a 6th one, chances are you are already familiar with the style of the author. You are familiar with the themes of the author. You are familiar with the universe of the author. So it's much easier to get into the book when you don't have to figure out what's the tone, what's the narrative voice, what sort of story is the author trying to tell me. In my case, I went towards P.G. Wodehouse. Now, of course, it helps that P.G. Wodehouse writes light fiction, writes comedies and funny situations. But what makes it easier to get into P.G. Wodehouse for me is that I've read many of his books before, so I know his style. I'm not surprised by the language of Bertie Wooster, because if you've never read any P.G. Wodehouse before, and let's say you start with the Jeeves and Wooster books, they are generally narrated by Wooster. And he has a very funny language, and it could be difficult for you to read one if you don't have a lot of concentration. But because I've read many before, I know the style, I know what I'm going to get, I know what is supposed to be funny and what is supposed to be absurd and what is supposed to not make any sense, and I just know what to expect. Tip number 3 is quite similar to the second tip. It would be read the next book in a series. If you already read the first book, not only you know the style of the author, but you also know the characters, you know the universe, you know the world, you know a lot of things that are going on already. So it makes it much easier to get into the book. The example I have for you is a book of Discworld by Terry Pratchett. Now, in Discworld, there are many sub-series, if I can call them that. This one is the City Watch. But if you read any other series, let's say any other book by Terry Pratchett set on Discworld, you already know what Discworld is. So it's already something that that is not new information. It's information you already have, so you can more easily get into the book. Tip number 4, which perhaps should have been tip number 1, is reread a favorite book. If you've already read the book, it's not difficult to get into it. You already know not only the style of the author, not only the characters, but you know very exactly what's going to happen. And it's much easier to get into the book. In my case, I went for Jane Austen. I have absolutely no originality into having Pride and Prejudice as one of my favorite books ever, but it is one of my favorite books ever, and it was just a joy to get back to Jane Austen. I did not reread it cover to cover. I just went for a little sample, the famous scene where Lady Catherine de Bourgh visits Longbourn. I just went for that. It's my favorite scene, and I just read that. So rereading, either from cover to cover or in a little bite size, is an excellent way to get into a book. The next group of tips is not so much for when you have difficulty getting into a book, but when you have difficulty staying into a book. Now, concentration can trick you in many ways. Perhaps you have enough energy to get into something, but you cannot really stay there. You are restless and you need a change of topic, a change of scenery at every chapter. That brings us to tip number 5. Read a collection of short stories or a collection of essays. Now, I have a great collection of short stories, which is this one, but I didn't turn to short stories. I turned to essays. I turned to These Precious Days by Anne Patchett. Now, these essays were published over several years for various publications, and that simply means that each essay can be read independently. So it doesn't matter whether you don't have the concentration to remember to amass information from one chapter to the next, to the next, to the next. You can sort of throw overboard a whole bunch of information whenever you change the chapter. You can erase everything you've read and then start over with this new essay that is not linked in any way, shape, or form to the previous one, which is also the case in this collection of short stories, which is by a whole bunch of different authors. So the short stories are not connected in any sort of way. So if you don't have any difficulty getting into something, but you have difficulty staying into it, short form fiction or nonfiction can really help. And speaking about short form nonfiction, that brings me to tip number 6. Read a book that was meant to be read into bite-sized chunks. I have 2 examples. This is Art. I forgot to check the title in English, but it's a translation from the English, so it does exist in English. And for every page, you have a work of art and a bit of explanation. And it is not necessarily meant to be read from cover to cover. You can read just a few pages. You can read about a single work of art, about a single movement, and then you forget everything and then you move on. And if you don't like art much, I also have this 30-second physics. It is meant to be read in 30-second chunks. So it's not always 30 seconds. Some of them were 5-minute chunks or 15-minute chunks. The 3-second thrash, the 3-minute thought, the 3 seconds biographies, the 30-second text. So it's really made into bite-sized chunks. And yeah, from page to page, whoops, you have something else. So that can also help you to read into bite-sized little things. And that brings us to tip number 7, which is also a bite-sized kind of form, which is poetry. Now, of course, poetry exists in long form, but most of it is in quite short form. So if you have a good anthology, you can go to a poem you like and just go straight to a poem you like and read that. If you are new to poetry, you can discover a poem. And the advantage of poetry, if you have no concentration, is that you don't feel bad into reading the same paragraph over and over and over again. Because if you're reading just a regular book and you're thinking, okay, I've been reading this paragraph 3 times, how come I cannot concentrate? In poetry, it's normal. Reread the same paragraph 3 times, reread the same line 10 times, and the beauty of it comes out. And you don't have necessarily to focus on meaning. If you don't have the mental energy to try to figure out what does it mean, you can just appreciate the sound. You can just appreciate the rhythm and just treat it as music, and just let your mind relax and try to find sense so much. And then my last tip would be, if everything else fails, heck with words, go for pictures and read picture books. Books with a lot of pictures in them. Beautiful coffee table books. And you don't even have to read the text. You can just read the images. And that is it. Those are my 8 tips to help you find books that you will be able to read in times of stress, when your mind wants to read but is not completely focused on reading. If you have any other tips that I missed, let me know in the comments. If you have used any of these tips, let me know too. And I will see you in the next video. À la prochaine!